Hey all, so I'm here today to tell you about a book that is coming out today or has been released today. And this is, I know I mentioned it briefly in both my summary of the year and my favorites of the year and so on, but I did want to kind of go into this in a little more detail. And this is the book, One of the Good Guys by Araminta Hall. I don't know if I said the writer's name right, but so the reason I was interested in this is it's being published by Gillian Flynn Books and has a quote by Gillian Flynn, and I love Gillian Flynn, so I was like, I must read this. So let me read you the summary, and then I'll kind of talk about it. So the summary is a propulsive and twisty page-turner with razor-sharp socio-political insight. One of the good guys asks, if most men claim to be good, why are most women still afraid to walk home alone at night? Newly separated from his wife and desperate to escape the ghost of his failed marriage, Cole leaves London for a fresh start in the countryside. He accepts a job as a wildlife ranger and settles into his cozy seaside cottage, relishing the respite from the noise, drama, and relentless careerism that curdled his relationship, along with his mental health. Then he meets Leonora, the reclusive artist living next door, and is instantly charmed by her warm and gentle spirit. But as the two forge a connection on the cliff's edge they call home, two young women activists raising awareness about gendered violence disappear while passing through. Cole and Leonora find themselves in the middle of a police investigation and resulting media firestorm as the world learns of what happened. And as the tension escalates, they quickly realize they don't know each other that well after all. From the critically acclaimed author of Our Kind of Cruelty and Imperfect Women comes an urgent psychological thriller about gender, power, and how both are captured in contemporary media. All right, this book I absolutely loved, and it is very, very complicated. It deals with like a lot of very, very urgent issues, violence against women, abuse of women, forms of abuse of women, men's attitudes towards women, women's attitudes towards men, just difficulties in relationships. So there's a lot going on. Social media and how that contributes to violence against women. But what I liked about it is that it made me super, super angry. And I was finding myself frustrated throughout. Yes, I'm agreeing with it. And I'm like yelling at the book and I'm yelling to the world about like how much I agree. And at the same time, like there are parts that you go, oh, I don't know how I feel about that, and, that's a little complicated, or, so there's no, like, easy ending. It's not an easy answer, and it's parts of it, it's kind of the type of thing that might make you frustrated, because you might be like, why did they do this, or why would this person do this, or this character is super unlikable, so even though I agree with them and about this, I kind of hate them, and I think that's okay. I think that's kind of the point, is that these are not, like, they are, to some degree, like, yeah, you shouldn't abuse women. And women should be treated equally and shouldn't be afraid to be alive. But there's a lot of nuance as well. And there's a lot of, like, how much, like, do we, like, interfere in people's lives, but things we might question that we wouldn't question in other scenarios. So, I mean, it's definitely leaning, towards obviously the feminist side of things, but again, it's still not easy because there are some choices made by some of the characters that are definitely morally, if not completely reprehensible, at least questionable, and definitely leaves you kind of going, I'm not sure if the ends justify the means in some of these things. And like, while I appreciate that you should be angry, it's kind of like, did we just make the situation worse? So there's a lot of like thought, but it's very, very thought-provoking. One of the things that I really liked is I like the structure of the book a lot. So the first third or so of the book is narrated from Cole's point of view. And it's him kind of talking about his feelings about women, his feelings about his marriage. And, like, you know, I don't think it's, like, very twisty and it's not really a spoiler to say that, like, nothing is really as it seems on the surface. I think it's kind of obvious early on that you're like, I don't know if I'm getting the full side of the story here, like all perspectives of this story. I'm only getting one side of it. And he definitely does things that you're kind of like, are you really a good guy? And I think it really definitely brings into, like, the conversation about, like, especially, you know, obviously we know about, like, the nice guy trope. And, like, you know, there are, like, and don't get me wrong, obviously there are plenty of good guys, but, like, we shouldn't have to, like, we shouldn't have to kind of clarify things to be like, we know it's not all men. We know there are good guys. Like, it's just kind of assumed, like, it's not all men. And we know there are decent men out there, but, like, oftentimes, you know, men will kind of force their, like, but I'm a good guy. And it's like, yeah, we know, but you don't need to tell us. Because you just be a good guy. And we don't have to, we're not including you when we're like, oh, men do this, or we're angry about this. You know, it's like, we know it doesn't include you. There are some people who are like, oh, it's really over the top, it's overly dramatic, or I'm a woman and I don't feel afraid all the time, and I'm like, well, good for you. It must be nice. But that has not been my experience in my life, and every woman I know has been, if not sexually assaulted, sexually harassed or objectified or gaslit or abused in some manner. So, yeah, I mean, that's just been my experience. And again, that's not every guy I know hasn't done it. But I don't think we should have to clarify that. I think that's, you know, it goes without saying. So anyway, that's the first third. And so it's Cole's point of view. And it's really interesting to kind of read knowing that, like, this isn't the full story. And then the second third of the book is by a character, and I don't want to reveal too much, so I'm just going to say it's by a character, and it gives us a different look at some of what we've already learned. And then the third part of the book is narrated by, it's kind of like a mix. It's a little bit of, not necessarily journal entries, but essentially like someone's sort of testimony. It's not a court drama, but for lack of a better word, testimony about what's happening in the story. And so that's a third perspective. And then that's where we get we get like a podcast, we're getting, you know, newspaper articles, we're getting like Twitter posts, Reddit forum posts, just some, like, you know, a lot of social media stuff, which is interesting. And there are people like calling out certain, like, oh, well, you can use an ampersand and a hashtag. And I'm like, okay, like, I don't think that's the point. I think the point is just, you know, doesn't actually have to be a Twitter feed. But I thought that was a really interesting, like, way to kind of make the point without, like, making the point. And I did see that some people felt that it was, like, heavy-handed. And I don't think it's heavy-handed as much as, like, it's just sort of, like, inundates you with, like, this messaging that is, there's complex conversations. And it's kind of frustrating because, like, there's not a lot of nuance in the conversations. Like, everyone's just kind of got their perspective, and they're just, like, forcing it onto, like, their social media posts. But that's sort of the point, because, like, that's sort of the world we live in, where, like, you don't get quietly, like, analyze 3 different perspectives or narratives. It's just, like, someone posts something on social media, and we react to it, and then someone reacts to our reaction, and it's just this constant state of, like, instantaneous reactions without the full side of everything. And again, not that, like, abusing women or raping women really has a side. Like, don't rape women or men, you know. But I do think, like, it definitely leaves a lot of things that you kind of are, like, you know, you're sort of on board with some of what's happening, but then you're also, like, that's part of the problem. So again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but I just thought this was super compelling. Really liked the structure, really liked just the narrative and the point of the book. Definitely made me angry in a lot of parts and left me kind of cynical, but in a good way, because I just felt like it was pretty authentic and realistic. So I do recommend it. I don't know who the audience really is. I mean, obviously women who are kind of angry, women who've been there, who've kind of seen it all. It can be really triggering. I mean, there are definitely some things that I think made me feel kind of physically ill. So I can only imagine, at this point, I'm pretty far removed from some of the experiences that I've had. But it still kind of affects me, obviously. But, so if it is something that you're kind of currently dealing with, there's also some stuff about IVF and, whether being a mom. And so there's some questions there too. So, obviously if anyone's had a miscarriage or is dealing with that, that's a whole other thing. And if you're dealing with violence from men or women, there are definitely some women who are both on, I don't want to say on both sides, but obviously feminists who are a little too much, and then women who claim to be feminists but don't support other women. And yeah, it gave me a lot to think about and a lot to talk about, and I'm really curious. If you do read it, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, because it's like I said, it's very rage-inducing but also really good. I do think it's going to require, if you're not a woman and you haven't experienced gendered violence, then it probably requires a certain level of empathy, which, I kind of feel like most books do. But for some reason, I've found over the last year that while I have read lots and lots and lots of books with male narrators, I've watched tons of movies that I love that have male protagonists, or TV shows with male characters, and I can kind of empathize with a male character. It seems for some reason it's very difficult for a lot of guys to empathize with a female character and what women deal with. And so it does require a little bit of trying to see it from the perspective of women. And I know that, plenty of people can do that, but there are definitely some guys who I think get very resistant to the idea of women's experiences and opinions. And again, I get it to some degree. I think some men are just afraid that they're going to get lumped into the bad guys. But I think that the book also kind of deals with that. Is you can't be one of the good guys if you're also not hearing what you're being told. So, yeah, really, really thought-provoking, and I highly recommend it. And it comes out today, so you should check it out. I don't know if this is going to be the cover forever. I don't really know if I like the cover for it, mostly because it's not that it's a bad cover. It just looks like a kind of generic sort of domestic suspense, and it's not at all. Like I said, it's more of a political sort of social commentary, satire, black comedy / very dark kind of look at violence against women and, gender roles in society. So I'm afraid that it might cutesy up or minimize the story in a way that I don't know is ideal. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if the cover stays, or maybe you love the cover. So who knows? But yeah, you should check it out. Like I said, it comes out today, and I'm curious what you think if you do read it. Okay, bye.